She had exactly 45 minutes to change her destiny. For Ivy Sterling, the State Bar exam wasn't just a test. It was her only exit ticket out of a life of crushing debt and hunger. But when she saw a young girl bleeding out in a rain-soaked alleyway, Ivy made a choice that destroyed her timeline. She missed the exam. She lost her future. Or so she thought. Because the girl she saved wasn't just anyone. She was the beloved sister of Dante Moretti, the city's most feared underworld king. Ivy expected eviction. What she got was a Rolls-Royce Phantom waiting at her curb. The rain in Chicago didn't wash things clean, it just made the grime slicker. Ivy Sterling checked her watch for the third time in 30 seconds. The glass face was cracked, a spiderweb fracture over the number 12, but the hands were moving relentlessly. Twilight till 15 a.m. The testing center for the State Bar exam was still 12 blocks away. Her umbrella had inverted 2 blocks back, a skeleton of cheap metal now protruding from a trash can, leaving her soaked to the bone. Her cheap blazer, bought from a thrift store specifically for this day, smelled of wet wool and anxiety. "Please," she whispered to the grey sky, clutching her bag tight against her chest. Inside were her admission ticket, her pencils, and the weight of 4 years of law school, fueled by instant noodles and 3 concurrent waitressing jobs. Just let me get there. If she passed this exam, she was hired. A junior associate position at Harrison and Miller. It meant a salary. It meant moving her grandmother, Nana Rose, out of the hospice facility that smelled like bleach and despair and into a private room. It meant life. Ivy took a shortcut through Gantry Lane. It was a narrow service alley behind the high-end boutiques of the Magnificent Mile, usually empty this early in the morning. She was running, her heels clacking against the wet asphalt, when she heard it. It wasn't a scream, it was a whimper, a wet, gurgling sound that stopped Ivy dead in her tracks. Logic screamed at her to keep running. "You have 40 minutes. Do not stop. This is Chicago. People get mugged every day. Keep moving." But Ivy Sterling had a fatal flaw. She couldn't look away. She slowed down, peering behind a stack of blue recycling dumpsters. There, curled in a fetal position against the brick wall, was a girl. She couldn't have been more than 19. She wore a white silk dress that was rapidly turning crimson. Ivy dropped her bag. The admission ticket inside fluttered, forgotten. "Hey!" Ivy rushed forward, dropping to her knees in the oily puddle. "Can you hear me?" The girl's eyes were wide, dilated with shock. They were a striking, unnatural shade of violet blue. Her skin was pale as marble, her lips trembling blue. A jagged slash ran across her abdomen, pulsing blood with every beat of her heart. "Don't," the girl gasped, clutching Ivy's wrist with surprising strength. "Don't call the police. They work for him." "Who?" Ivy didn't wait for an answer. She ripped the scarf from her neck, a cashmere blend Nana Rose had knitted, and pressed it hard against the wound. "Ah!" the girl cried out. I know, I'm sorry," Ivy said, her voice shaking but her hand steady. "I have to apply pressure. You're losing too much blood." Ivy checked her watch. 8:35 a.m. If she left now, sprinted, and ignored the blood on her hands, she might make the doors before they locked at 9 Warsats a.m. But if she left, this girl would be dead in 10 minutes. The girl's grip on Ivy's wrist loosened. Her eyes rolled back. No, stay with me." Ivy slapped the girl's cheek lightly. "What's your name?" Sophia, she whispered. "Okay, Sophia, I'm Ivy. I'm going to call an ambulance. I don't care who you're afraid of. You need a surgeon." Ivy fumbled for her phone with blood-slicked fingers. She dialed 911, barking coordinates and medical details with the precision of the lawyer she was supposed to become today. By the time the sirens wailed in the distance, it was 8:52 a.m. By the time the paramedics loaded Sophia onto the stretcher, pushing Ivy aside, it was 9:10 a.m. Ivy stood alone in the alleyway as the ambulance doors slammed shut. The rain had stopped, leaving a heavy, humid silence. She looked down at her hands. They were stained red. She looked at her blazer. Ruined. She looked at her watch. 9:15 a.m. The doors to the testing center were locked. The exam had begun. Ivy sank against the wet brick wall, sliding down until she hit the ground. She didn't cry. She was too hollow for tears. She just stared at the blood drying on her fingernails and realized she had just thrown her entire life away for a stranger who didn't want the police called. She walked home in a daze. Her apartment was a fourth-floor walk-up in the crumbling part of the south side, where the streetlights flickered and the potholes were deep enough to swallow a tire. Nana Rose called her at 6:00 p.m. "How did it go, my sweet girl? Did you crush it?" The old woman's voice crackled over the phone line. Ivy bit her lip until she tasted copper. I think I did okay, Nana. I think I did really well." She hung up and finally let herself scream, burying her face in a pillow so the neighbors wouldn't call the landlord. The next morning, the sun had the audacity to shine. Ivy woke up to a rhythmic, heavy thumping sound. For a second, she thought it was her own headache, a hangover from a night of crying and drinking cheap wine. Then she realized it was the front door. "Sterling, open up!" It was Mr. Henderson, the landlord. Ivy dragged herself out of bed, pulling on a robe. She opened the door a crack. Mr. Henderson was a short man, with a greasy comb-over and eyes that were constantly calculating other people's misery. "Mr. Henderson, I don't have the rent yet," Ivy said, her voice hoarse. "My check clears on Friday." "You're 2 months behind, Sterling," Henderson sneered, jamming a folded piece of paper through the crack. "This is a notice to quit. You have 3 days. Pay up or get out. I have a nice couple asking about this unit, and they actually have jobs." He spat on the floor near her welcome mat and waddled away. Ivy stared at the eviction notice. 3 days. She had $17 in her bank account. She had missed the bar exam, which meant the job offer at Harrison and Miller would be rescinded by Monday. She was effectively homeless. She went to the kitchen to make coffee, but the canister was empty. "Perfect," she muttered. "Just perfect." She decided to go down to the bodega on the corner. Maybe old Mr. Russo would let her have a cup on credit. She dressed in jeans and a hoodie, trying to look invisible. As she stepped out of her building's front door, she froze. The street was usually lined with rusted sedans, beat-up Hondas, and the occasional stripped chassis resting on cinder blocks. But today, right in front of her building, blocking the fire hydrant with absolute arrogance, was a car that cost more than the entire city block. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom. Matte black. The chrome grille gleamed like the teeth of a predator. The windows were tinted so dark they looked like voids. A small crowd of neighbors had gathered. Kids were pointing. Old men were shaking their heads, assuming a drug dealer had moved in. Ivy kept her head down, intending to skirt around the massive vehicle. Click. The rear door of the Rolls-Royce swung open. A man stepped out from the driver's side. He was huge, at least 6'4", wearing a suit that fit him like armor. He had a scar running through his eyebrow and looked like he chewed gravel for breakfast. He walked around the car, ignoring the gawking neighbors, and stood directly in Ivy's path. "Ivy Sterling?" he asked. His voice was a deep rumble. Ivy stepped back, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Who's asking?" The giant didn't smile. "My employer would like a word." "I don't have any money," Ivy said quickly, her hands coming up defensively. "If this is about the student loans or the credit cards, it is not about debt, Miss Sterling. Please, get in the car." I'm not getting in a strange car with you." The giant sighed, as if he dealt with stubborn people daily. He reached into his pocket. Ivy flinched, expecting a gun. Instead, he pulled out a scarf. It was her scarf, the cashmere blend Nana Rose had knitted. It was washed, dried, and folded neatly, but she could still see the faint ghost of a stain where the blood had been. "She is awake," the giant said, "and she wants to see the woman who saved her life." Ivy's breath caught. The girl in the alley. She looked at the open door of the Phantom. The interior was cream leather, pristine and inviting. She looked at her crumbling apartment building, where an eviction notice sat on her counter. She had nothing left to lose. Ivy climbed into the back seat. The door shut with a heavy, pressurized thud, cutting off the noise of the street instantly. The air inside smelled of expensive cologne, sandalwood, leather, and something sharp, like gunpowder. Sitting on the other side of the back seat was a man. If the driver was a hammer, this man was a scalpel. He was terrifyingly handsome, with sharp, aristocratic features and jet-black hair swept back from a high forehead. He wore a three-piece charcoal suit that probably cost more than Ivy's tuition. But it was his eyes that froze her. They were dark, intelligent, and utterly devoid of warmth. He was reading a file. Her file. He didn't look up as the car began to glide forward, the suspension making the potholes feel like clouds. "Ivy Madeline Sterling," he read, his voice smooth and cold. "Top 5% of your class at Chicago Law. Editor of the Law Review. You work 3 jobs: the Rusty Spoon Diner, transcript editing for the court, and night shift at the University Library." He finally looked up, closing the folder. His gaze pinned her to the seat. "And yesterday," he continued, "you missed the Illinois State Bar exam. You forfeited your conditional employment at Harrison and Miller." Ivy bristled, her pride flaring up despite her fear. "Is there a point to this background check, or do you just enjoy reading about people's failures?" The man's lips twitched, a micro-reaction. "I am Dante Moretti." The air left Ivy's lungs. She knew the name. Everyone in Chicago knew the name. The Moretti family didn't just run the underworld. They owned half the legitimate construction and shipping businesses in the city. They were untouchable, and they were dangerous. "Your sister," Ivy whispered. "Sophia." "Sophia is stable," Dante said. "The doctors say the tourniquet you applied saved her kidney and likely her life. She lost 3 pints of blood before you found her." "I'm glad she's okay," Ivy said, reaching for the door handle, even though the car was moving at 40 miles per hour. "Now, if you could just drop me off—" "Why did you stop?" Dante interrupted. "What?" "You knew the time. You knew the stakes. I know people who would sell their own mothers for a seat at that exam. You saw a stranger bleeding in an alley, a dangerous alley, and you stopped. Why?" Ivy looked out the window at the blurring city. "Because she was dying, and nobody else was coming." "Altruism," Dante said, the word like it was a rare disease. "A fatal weakness in my world, but a useful tool in yours." The car turned off the highway, heading toward the affluent suburbs of Lake Forest. The iron gates of a massive estate loomed ahead. "Where are we going?" Ivy demanded. "You saved a Moretti," Dante said, adjusting his cufflinks. "We pay our debts, always." "I don't want your money," Ivy lied. She desperately wanted money. She needed money. But she knew that Moretti money came with blood on it. "Just drop me at a bus station." Dante pressed a button, and a glass partition slid up, separating them from the driver. "I know about the eviction, Ivy. I know about Nana Rose's hospice bills. I know you are $17 away from starvation." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a check. He placed it on the leather console between them. Ivy looked down. It was made out to her. The amount was blank. "Fill it out," Dante said softly. "Whatever price you think your future was worth. 100,000? 500? A million? Consider it a consultancy fee." Ivy stared at the check. It was freedom. It was Nana Rose's private room. It was a new life. She picked up the check. Her fingers trembled. Then she ripped it in half. The sound of the tearing paper was loud in the silent cabin. Dante's eyes narrowed. For the first time, he looked genuinely surprised. "Explain." "I don't take charity," Ivy said, her voice shaking but firm. "And I don't take blood money. I saved her because it was the right thing to do. Not because I wanted a payout from you." Dante studied her for a long moment. The silence stretched, thick with tension. He looked at the torn check, then back at her face, analyzing her poverty-stricken clothes, her defiant chin, the fear in her eyes that she was trying so hard to hide. "You are a fool, Ivy Sterling," Dante said quietly, "but you are an interesting fool." The car came to a stop in front of a mansion that looked more like a fortress. Stone lions guarded the entrance. Men with earpieces patrolled the perimeter. "Since you refuse charity," Dante said, opening his door, "perhaps you will accept a job." "I'm not being a mule for your drugs, and I'm not cooking your books," Ivy snapped. Dante stepped out, then leaned back in, offering her a hand. The sunlight caught the gold signet ring on his pinky, the crest of a wolf. "My family is under attack, Ms. Sterling. Someone tried to kill my sister yesterday. Someone close to me. I have soldiers, I have hitmen, and I have yes-men. What I don't have is someone smart enough to see the things I miss, and moral enough not to be bought by my enemies." He waited, his hand extended. "Be my personal legal counsel. Find the traitor in my organization. Do this, and I won't just pay your debts. I'll make sure no one in this city ever dares to close a door in your face again." Ivy looked at his hand. It was a deal with the devil. She knew it. But she remembered the eviction notice. She remembered Sophia's terrified blue eyes. Ivy took his hand. "I have conditions," she said. Dante Moretti smiled, and it was the most dangerous thing she had ever seen. "I would expect nothing less." The interior of the Moretti estate was a masterclass in intimidation. The floors were black marble, the ceilings high enough to develop their own weather systems, and the silence was absolute. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the silence of a held breath before a gunshot. "My conditions," Ivy said, her voice echoing slightly in the grand foyer. She refused to look at the artwork on the walls, suspecting they were worth more than her entire neighborhood. Dante stopped at the foot of a sweeping staircase. "Name them." "1. I answer only to you. Not your lieutenants, not your drivers. You," Ivy listed, holding up a finger. 2. I do not participate in violence. I track money. I read contracts. I find the leak. If you ask me to pull a trigger or hide a body, I walk. I don't care how much you pay me." Dante studied her, his expression unreadable. "And the third?" 3. Nana Rose. Ivy's voice softened, losing its hard edge. "She needs round-the-clock care, the best specialists, and she never finds out who you are or where the money comes from. To her, I'm just a successful lawyer at a top firm." "Done," Dante said instantly. He didn't bargain. He didn't hesitate. "My assistant Leo will handle the transfer of your grandmother within the hour. As for the violence, I hire you for your brain, Ivy. I have plenty of men for the physical work." He gestured for her to follow him. "Come. You need to meet the suspects." "Suspects?" Ivy hurried to keep up with his long strides. "I thought I was starting with paperwork." "The paperwork is a lie," Dante said coldly. "The truth is in the eyes. I'm calling a meeting of my inner circle. I want you in the room. I want you to watch them when I tell them Sophia was attacked." They entered a library that smelled of old paper and cigars. 3 men were already waiting. They stood up as Dante entered, the air in the room instantly becoming heavy with testosterone and tension. Dante moved to the head of the mahogany table, gesturing for Ivy to stand beside him. "Gentlemen," Dante began, his voice low, "this is Ivy Sterling. She is my new legal consultant." Ivy scanned the faces. First was Silas Thorne, the family's longtime lawyer. He was a man in his 50s, with silver hair and a suit that looked sharper than a knife. He looked at Ivy with open disdain, clearly threatened by a younger, unknown variable. Second was Rocco, the enforcer. He was built like a vending machine, with knuckles scarred from years of breaking things. He didn't look at Ivy. He looked at the door, constantly scanning for threats. Third was Adrian, Dante's younger cousin. He was handsome in a boyish, reckless way, with a loose tie and a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. He looked Ivy up and down, with an appreciation that made her skin crawl. "A consultant," Silas scoffed, cleaning his glasses. "Dante, we have the best legal team in Chicago. What can a child who hasn't even passed the bar do for us?" "She can save my sister," Dante said. The room went dead silent. "Which is more than any of you did yesterday." Dante leaned forward, placing his hands on the table. "Someone leaked Sophia's location. She was at a private gallery opening, unlisted. Only the 4 people in this room knew she would be there." Ivy watched them. She used the skills she learned waiting tables, reading people's tells. Rocco clenched his jaw, a muscle feathering in his cheek. Anger or guilt? Adrian looked down at his phone, hiding his eyes. Avoidance? Silas stopped cleaning his glasses and froze. Calculation. "Who did it?" Dante asked softly. "Confess now and I'll make it quick." Silence stretched. "I'm bringing Ivy in to audit the books," Dante lied smoothly. "She's going to go through every transaction, every phone record, every shell company connected to this family for the last 6 months. If there is a penny out of place, she will find it." Ivy felt 3 pairs of eyes snap to her. She was no longer just a girl, she was a target. "Good luck, sweetheart," Adrian drawled, breaking the tension. "Our books are complicated." "I like complicated," Ivy lied, keeping her face neutral. "Dismissed," Dante ordered. As the men filed out, Silas paused at the door. He looked at Ivy, a thin smile playing on his lips. "The legal world is small, Ms. Sterling. Be careful you don't burn bridges you can't rebuild." It was a threat, wrapped in professional courtesy. Once they were alone, Ivy let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. "They hate me." "Good," Dante said, walking over to a sideboard and pouring 2 glasses of amber liquid. "If they liked you, I'd be worried." He handed her a glass. "Whiskey. You look like you need it." Ivy took the glass but didn't drink. "Silas, the lawyer. He's the smart one. He was the only one who wasn't afraid of you. He was afraid of me." Dante's eyes gleamed with approval. "Silas has been with the family since my father's time. He handles the offshore accounts. If he's the traitor, then he knows how to hide it," Ivy finished. "I need access to everything, Dante. The real books, not the ones you show the IRS." "You're asking for the keys to the kingdom," Dante warned. "Once you see those numbers, there is no going back to your old life. You become an accessory to federal crimes." Ivy thought about Nana Rose. She thought about the way the hospital staff used to look at her when her credit card was declined. "I'm already an accessory," she said, taking a sip of the whiskey. It burned, hot and grounding. "Show me the money." For the next 3 days, Ivy lived in a windowless room in the basement of the Moretti estate. It was a secure server room, humming with the sound of cooling fans. She was drowning in data, spreadsheets, bank transfers, crypto wallets, and shipping manifests. It was a labyrinth of money laundering designed to look like legitimate commerce. The Morettis owned construction firms, waste management companies, and a chain of high-end bakeries that somehow generated $3 million a month in flour costs. Ivy slept on a cot in the corner for 4 hours a night. She ate sandwiches brought to her by the silent giant who had driven the Rolls-Royce. Dante visited her every evening. He never stayed long, just checked on her progress, his presence filling the small room. On the third night, he brought her coffee. Real coffee from an espresso machine, not the instant sludge she was used to. "You look tired," he observed, leaning against the doorframe. He had discarded his jacket, his white dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle. "I'm finding patterns." Ivy rubbed her eyes, which were burning from screen glare. "Someone is siphoning money from the shipping division. Small amounts, rounding errors. But they add up. How much? Over 5 years? $12 million? Dante's face darkened. "Stealing from me is a death sentence. But why would they risk it for 12 million? My lieutenants make that in bonuses. It's not just theft." Ivy tapped the screen. "Look at the dates of the withdrawals. Every time money goes out, something happens. A raid on a rival gang, a police bust on one of your warehouses, a politician getting bribed." She looked up at him. "They aren't stealing the money to keep it, Dante. They're using your own money to pay for information against you. They're building a war chest." Dante moved closer, looking at the screen over her shoulder. He was so close she could smell the sandalwood and gunpowder scent of him. Her heart did a traitorous little flip. "Can you trace where the money goes?" he asked, his voice low near her ear. "It goes to a shell company in the Caymans called Blue Horizon. I'm trying to crack the owner now, but..." Suddenly, the lights in the server room flickered. The computer screens went black. "What happened?" Ivy asked, panic rising. "Did the power cut?" "No." Dante's voice shifted instantly into combat mode. He grabbed Ivy's arm, pulling her away from the desk. "The generator didn't kick in. This was cut manually." The electronic lock on the door beeped. Access denied. "We're locked in," Ivy whispered. "Someone knows you found the trail," Dante said. He pulled a handgun from the holster at the small of his back. "Get behind the server rack, now." Ivy scrambled behind the tower of metal and wires. "Dante, the air..." The humming of the fans had stopped. The room was getting stiflingly hot, fast, but then she smelled it. Gas. "They aren't coming in," Dante realized, his face grim. "They're pumping something in. Carbon monoxide? Halon?" "The ventilation shafts." Ivy pointed to a grate near the ceiling. "If we can pop that..." "It's too small for me," Dante said, looking at the narrow opening. He looked at Ivy. "But you might fit." "I'm not leaving you." "You aren't leaving. You're opening the door from the outside." Dante holstered his gun and cupped his hands. "Up. Now." Ivy didn't argue. She stepped into his hands, and he hoisted her up with effortless strength. She grabbed the grate, her fingers tearing at the metal mesh. It was screwed shut. "It's stuck," she coughed. The air was getting thin. "Kick it," Dante commanded. Ivy braced her back against the ceiling and kicked the grate with the heel of her boot. Once, twice. The metal groaned. On the third kick, it gave way with a clang. She shimmied into the dark, dusty duct. It was tight, claustrophobic, and filled with cobwebs. She crawled, her knees scraping against the metal, following the faint light ahead. She dropped down into the hallway outside the server room. 2 guards were standing there, wearing gas masks. They weren't Moretti men. They were mercenaries. Ivy froze. She was unarmed. She was a law student, not a ninja. One of the men saw her. He raised a suppressed pistol. Think, Ivy. Think. She grabbed the nearest thing, a fire extinguisher mounted on the wall. As the man fired, the bullet pinged off the metal canister in her hands. Ivy pulled the pin and squeezed the handle, not aiming at the men, but at the floor. A massive cloud of white chemical powder exploded into the hallway, creating an instant smoke screen. "Can't see!" one mercenary yelled. Ivy didn't wait. She slammed the extinguisher into the keypad of the server room door, shattering the plastic casing. The failsafe engaged, and the door clicked open. "Dante!" she screamed. Gunfire erupted from inside the room. 3 distinct shots. Bang! 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 Then silence. Ivy's heart stopped. "Dante!" A hand gripped her shoulder, pulling her down. Dante emerged from the smoke, coughing, his eyes watering. He had his gun in one hand and dragged a mercenary by the vest with the other, using the unconscious man as a shield. "Go," he rasped, "to the garage." They ran. The mansion was in chaos. Alarms were finally blaring. They burst into the garage. Dante shoved Ivy toward the Rolls-Royce. "Get in." As she scrambled into the passenger seat, she saw Dante turn back toward the house door. "What are you doing?" she yelled. "Someone let them in," Dante said, his face a mask of cold fury. "I'm going to find out who." "No!" Ivy reached out and grabbed his arm. "If you go back in there, you're walking into a trap. They want you dead, Dante. If you die, Sophia dies. Nana Rose dies. I die." Dante looked at her hand on his arm. Then he looked at her face, smeared with soot and fear. "We leave," he decided. "But this isn't a retreat, Ivy. It's a hunt." He jumped into the driver's seat. The engine roared to life. As the garage door opened, tires screeched. A black SUV blocked the driveway. Men with automatic rifles spilled out of the SUV. "Hang on," Dante said calmly. He shifted the Rolls-Royce into gear and floored it. The heavy car didn't swerve. It rammed straight into the side of the SUV, metal crunching like soda cans. The impact threw the gunman off balance. Dante spun the wheel, drifting the massive car around the wreckage and tearing out of the estate gates. Ivy was hyperventilating. She clutched the dashboard. Where are we going?" Dante checked the rearview mirror. No one was following yet. "My safe house," he said. "Nobody knows about it, not even Silas." He glanced over at her. "You did good back there, counselor. The fire extinguisher. That was creative." "I was aiming for his head," Ivy admitted, her voice trembling. "I missed." Dante actually chuckled. It was a dark, dry sound. "Remind me never to piss you off in a hallway." Ivy looked down at her hands. They were shaking uncontrollably. She had just been in a gunfight. She had almost died. "Dante," she whispered. "Blue Horizon, the shell company." "What about it?" "While I was crawling through the vent, I remembered something. The logo on the paperwork. It was a stylized sun." "So?" "I've seen it before," Ivy said, turning to look at him. "On a tie pin. The day I met your inner circle." Dante's grip on the steering wheel tightened until his knuckles turned white. "Who?" he demanded. "Adrian," Ivy said. "Your cousin." Dante didn't say a word. He just stared at the dark road ahead, his eyes burning with a betrayal that ran deeper than blood. The war had just begun. The safe house wasn't a bunker. It was an architectural marvel of glass and steel, hidden deep in the woods of Wisconsin, about 2 hours north of Chicago. Dante drove in silence, his eyes constantly scanning the rearview mirror. The Rolls-Royce, battered and scraped down one side, looked like a wounded beast as it crunched over the gravel driveway. "Get inside," Dante ordered, killing the engine. "Don't touch the windows. The glass is bulletproof, but I don't want shadows visible from the tree line." Ivy stepped out. Her legs felt like jelly. The adrenaline dump was hitting her hard now, leaving her shaking and cold. Inside, the house was modern and stark. Dante punched a code into a panel by the door. Steel shutters descended over the glass walls with a heavy mechanical whir, sealing them into a grey metal box. "We're safe here," Dante said, his voice rough. He walked straight to the kitchen island and poured 2 glasses of water, his hand steady, though his eyes were a storm of emotions. "Adrian," he said the name like a curse. "He grew up in my house. My father raised him when his parents died. I gave him the shipping division. I gave him everything." Ivy took the water, her teeth chattering against the glass. "Betrayal never comes from your enemies, Dante. That's why it hurts." Dante looked at her. He saw the soot on her cheek, the rip in her hoodie, the terror she was barely holding back. He walked around the island and stood in front of her. "You're hurt," he said, reaching out to touch a scrape on her forehead. "I'm fine," Ivy whispered. The proximity was dizzying. "You're not fine. You're in shock." Dante took her hand. "Come. There's a bathroom upstairs. You need a hot shower." He led her up the floating staircase. The master bathroom was cavernous, with a rain shower large enough for 4 people. He set out a stack of fluffy white towels and a heavy robe. "I'll find you some clothes," he said, turning to leave. "Dante," Ivy called out. He stopped at the door. "What are we going to do? If Adrian controls the men, we can't go back to the city. We're alone." Dante looked back at her, his dark eyes burning. "We aren't alone. Adrian has the soldiers, yes, but I have the codes. I have the leverage. And I have you. Me? You found the money trail. You found the weakness. Tomorrow, we don't fight them with guns. We fight them with the one thing Adrian cares about more than blood: greed." Ivy showered, scrubbing the smell of smoke and fear from her skin. When she came out, wrapped in the oversized robe, Dante was sitting on the edge of the bed. He had changed into a black t-shirt and sweatpants, looking less like a mafia don and more like a man carrying the weight of the world. He was cleaning a jagged cut on his forearm with rubbing alcohol. "Let me," Ivy said softly. She took the cotton pad from him. He didn't resist. She dabbed at the wound, her touch gentle. "Why do you stay?" Dante asked, watching her face. "You could have run into the woods when we stopped. You could have stolen a car and disappeared to another state." "I told you," Ivy said, bandaging his arm with precision. "I don't leave things unfinished. And I made a promise to Nana Rose. I told her I had a new job. I can't let her down." "Is that the only reason?" Dante's voice dropped an octave. Ivy looked up. Their faces were inches apart. The air in the room grew thick, charged with the electricity of 2 people who had survived death together. "No," Ivy admitted, her breath catching. "I stayed because I wanted to make sure you didn't die alone." Dante's hand came up, cupping her cheek. His thumb brushed over her bottom lip. "I have spent my whole life building walls," Dante whispered. "Armor, money, power. And in 3 days, a girl with no money and a broken watch has walked right through them." He leaned in. Ivy's eyes fluttered shut. His lips brushed hers, tentative at first. A question. Then, as Ivy leaned into him, the kiss deepened. It was desperate, hungry, fueled by the adrenaline and the rage of the betrayal. It tasted of whiskey and danger. Ivy's hands tangled in his hair, pulling him closer. For a moment, there was no mafia, no hitmen, no eviction notices. Just the heat of his skin and the pounding of her heart. Dante pulled back, resting his forehead against hers. He was breathing hard. "If we survive this," he growled low in his throat, "I am going to give you the world, Ivy Sterling. whether you want it or not. First, Ivy whispered, opening her eyes, we have to take down your cousin. Dante nodded, the hardness returning to his eyes. He stood up, the moment of vulnerability gone, replaced by the cold calculation of the capo. I have a plan, he said, but you're going to have to trust me. It's dangerous. I'm listening. Adrian thinks we're running. He thinks I'm weak. We're going to use that. We're going to stage a surrender. A surrender? Ivy frowned. You're going to turn yourself in? No. Dante smiled, a wolfish, terrifying grin. I'm going to die. Or at least, that's what Adrian is going to believe. The next morning, the headline on the Chicago Tribune website screamed, Shootout at Moretti Estate. Mafia Don presumed dead in fiery crash. Ivy sat in the passenger seat of a stolen Ford sedan, reading the article on a burner phone. It's trending, she said. Someone leaked a photo of the Rolls-Royce burning in a ditch. Good, Dante said. He was driving, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses. My security chief Bruno is loyal. He planted the wreck. By now, Adrian is popping champagne. Are you sure he'll take the bait? Adrian is arrogant, Dante said, turning the car onto the exit for downtown Chicago. He's been waiting for me to die for 10 years. He won't question it. He'll rush to consolidate power. And the first place he'll go is the hospital. To kill Sophia, Ivy realized, a chill running down her spine. Because she's the heir. Exactly. He can't claim the empire while my sister breathes. They parked 3 blocks away from Northwestern Memorial Hospital. The towering glass building reflected the grey city skyline. Here, Dante handed Ivy a small earpiece. Put this in. Keep the line open. I'll hear everything you hear. I still hate this plan, Ivy said, her hands shaking slightly as she adjusted the hidden wire under her collar. You're the only one who can get close to him, Ivy. To him, you're just the scared lawyer girl. He doesn't know you're the one who cracked his ledger. Dante looked at her intensely. If things go south, you say the word red, and I come in. No matter what. Okay. Ivy took a deep breath. Let's go catch a traitor. Ivy walked into the hospital lobby. She looked exactly like what she was pretending to be. A terrified employee. She had messed up her hair, rubbed her eyes until they were red, and wore her ruined blazer. She approached the front desk. Please, I need to see Sophia Moretti. I have a message from her brother. The nurse frowned, but before she could answer, a hand clamped down on Ivy's shoulder. Well, well, a smooth voice purred. If it isn't the little legal eagle. Ivy turned. It was Adrian. He was wearing a black morning suit, looking appropriately somber for the cameras, but his eyes were dancing with triumph. Flanked by 2 massive bodyguards, he looked every inch the new king. Adrian, Ivy gasped, playing up the fear. Thank God, I didn't know where to go. Dante, I know, sweetheart, Adrian said, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. A tragedy. Truly. But you're safe now. Why are you here? Dante gave me something, Ivy lied, clutching her bag. Before the crash, he gave me a key to a safety deposit box. He said if anything happened, I had to give it to Sophia. Only Sophia. Adrian's eyes narrowed. Greed flickered instantly. A safety deposit box meant leverage, blackmail, or money. Sophia is in a coma, Ivy, Adrian said, stepping closer. She can't help you, but I can. Give me the key. No, Ivy backed away. He said only Sophia. I have to see her. Adrian sighed, checking his watch. Fine. She's on the 12th floor. Private wing. I was just heading there to pay my respects. Come with me. He steered her toward the elevators. The guards followed. Inside the elevator, the silence was suffocating. You know, Adrian said casually, watching the numbers climb. "You're lucky you weren't in the car with him. It was a messy way to go." "Why did you do it?" Ivy asked, her voice trembling. "He loved you." Adrian laughed. It was a cold, ugly sound. "Love? Dante didn't love me. He pitied me. He walked around like a saint, trying to turn the family legitimate, trying to make us into construction magnates. He forgot what we are, Ivy. We are wolves, and wolves don't build houses. They hunt." Ding. The doors opened on the 12th floor. The hallway was empty. The usual police guard was missing. "Where are the cops?" Ivy asked, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I dismissed them," Adrian smiled. Family privacy. He led her to room 1204. Inside, Sophia lay on the bed, hooked up to monitors. The rhythmic beeping was the only sound. Adrian walked to the foot of the bed. He looked at his cousin, then pulled a syringe from his jacket pocket. "Give me the key, Ivy," Adrian said, uncapping the needle. "And maybe I'll let you walk out of here alive." "There is no key," Ivy said, her voice suddenly steady. She dropped the act. She stood straighter, her eyes hard. Adrian paused. "Excuse me?" "There is no key. There is no safety deposit box. I just needed to get you in this room, away from your army, and hear you admit it." Adrian stared at her, then burst out laughing. "You stupid girl. You think a confession matters? Who are you going to tell? The police? I own the police captain." He gestured to his bodyguards. "Throw her out the window. Make it look like a suicide. Grief over her lost boss." The bodyguard stepped forward. "I wouldn't do that," a deep voice rumbled from the ensuite bathroom. The bathroom door swung open. Dante Moretti stepped out. He wasn't dead. He wasn't burned. He was wearing a tactical vest over a black shirt, and he was holding a Beretta 92 FS pointed directly at Adrian's chest. Adrian's face went white. The syringe clattered to the floor. Dante?" he stammered. "But the crash." "A Rolls-Royce is just a car, Adrian," Dante said, stepping into the room. His eyes were voids of darkness. "You can buy another car. You can't buy loyalty." The two bodyguards reached for their weapons. "Don't," Dante warned. "Look out the window." One of the guards glanced at the blinds. Below, in the hospital courtyard, 20 men in black suits were standing in formation. They weren't Adrian's men. They were wearing the silver wolf pin of the Loyalists, men Bruno had rallied while Adrian was busy celebrating. "The hospital is surrounded," Dante said calmly. "Your men in the lobby have already been disarmed. You are alone." Adrian looked from the window to Dante, panic setting in. Then his expression twisted into a snarl. "You won't shoot me," Adrian spat. "I'm family. You're too weak, Dante. That's always been your problem. You have too much heart." Adrian lunged. Not at Dante. He lunged at Ivy. He grabbed her, pulling a hidden knife from his sleeve and pressing the blade against her throat. He used her as a human shield, backing toward the door. "Drop the gun," Adrian screamed. "Drop it or I open her up right here." Ivy felt the cold steel against her jugular. She couldn't breathe. She looked at Dante. Dante's gun didn't waver, but his eyes. For the first time, Ivy saw fear in them, real, paralyzing fear. "Let her go, Adrian," Dante said, his voice low and dangerous. "Back off," Adrian yelled, edging into the hallway. "I'm walking out of here, and I'm taking the girl. You follow me. She dies." "Dante," Ivy whispered. She knew Adrian would kill her the moment they were clear. She was a loose end. She remembered the self-defense class she took in her first year of college. Stomp the instep, elbow the gut. It was a gamble. If she missed, she died. But looking at Dante, she knew he couldn't take the shot. Not with her in the way. Ivy didn't wait for a hero. She slammed her heel down onto Adrian's foot with all her strength. As he howled in pain, she threw her head back, smashing her skull into his nose. There was a sickening crunch. Adrian's grip loosened for a fraction of a second. Ivy dropped to the floor. Bang! The sound was deafening in the small room. Ivy looked up. Adrian stood there for a moment, a look of shock on his face. A small red hole had appeared in his forehead. He collapsed backward, dead before he hit the linoleum. Dante stood there, the gun still raised, smoke curling from the barrel. He hadn't hesitated the moment Ivy was clear. He holstered the gun and rushed to her, falling to his knees and pulling her into his arms. "Are you okay?" he demanded, scanning her for cuts. "Did he cut you?" "I'm fine," Ivy gasped, adrenaline flooding her system again. "I'm fine." Dante buried his face in her neck, holding her so tight it almost hurt. "I thought, for a second—" "I know," Ivy whispered, holding him back. "Mr. Moretti." A voice came from the doorway. It was Bruno, the security chief. He stepped over Adrian's body without blinking. "The building is secure. The traitor's lieutenants have been rounded up. The family is yours again." Dante stood up, pulling Ivy with him. He looked at his dead cousin, then at his sister, sleeping peacefully in the bed. "Clean this up," Dante ordered coldly, "and get the car. We're leaving." "Where to, boss?" Bruno asked. Dante looked at Ivy. He wiped a smudge of blood from her cheek with his thumb. "Home," Dante said, and then to a law firm. 3 months later, the gavel banged against the mahogany block in courtroom 4B. "Case dismissed," the judge declared. Ivy Sterling exhaled, smoothing the skirt of her tailored cream suit. It wasn't thrifted, it was Italian silk. She had just dismantled a corporate espionage lawsuit that senior partners twice her age had called unwinnable. As she stepped onto the windy Chicago sidewalk, the crowd parted. Not because of her new reputation, but because of the matte black Rolls-Royce Phantom idling at the curb. Dante Moretti stepped out, wearing a charcoal trench coat that made him look like a dark prince of the city. He ignored the honking traffic, his eyes locking onto hers. "I heard you won," he said, opening the rear door. "It was a minor zoning dispute, Dante," Ivy smiled, sliding onto the familiar cream leather. "You won," he stated firmly. "That makes it major." The car didn't head toward the Moretti estate. Instead, it stopped in front of a glass skyscraper downtown. Harrison and Miller, the same firm that had revoked her job offer the day she saved Sophia. "Why are we here?" Ivy asked, as Dante guided her into the executive elevator. "To correct a mistake." They walked into the boardroom. The senior partners, the men who had once looked down on Ivy, were seated around the table, sweating. Mr. Harrison stood up, his hands shaking as he adjusted his tie. "Mr. Moretti," Harrison stammered. "The papers are ready." Dante pulled out the chair at the head of the table. "Sit, Ivy." He slid a thick document toward her. The title page read, "Majority Acquisition." "I bought 51% of the firm," Dante whispered in her ear, his hand resting possessively on her shoulder. "I don't trust these men to treat you right as an associate. So I'm appointing you managing partner." Ivy looked up, stunned. "Dante, I've been a lawyer for 3 months." "And you've been the legal counsel for the Moretti family during a war," he countered, loud enough for the room to hear. "Compared to that, this boardroom is a playground. Sign it, Ivy. Make this place honest. Make it feared." Ivy looked at the terrified partners, then at the pen. She realized he wasn't just giving her a job. He was giving her a weapon. She signed her name with a flourish. That evening, the estate was glowing with lights. On the terrace, Nana Rose, looking healthy and vibrant in a silk shawl, was laughing with a fully recovered Sophia. "They look happy," Ivy said, watching them from the balcony railing. They are safe, Dante corrected. Because of you. He turned her to face him, the moonlight reflecting off the lake behind them. He reached into his pocket and produced a velvet box. Inside sat a diamond so large it looked like a shard of ice set in black gold. You saved my sister. You saved my empire, Dante said, his voice raw. I can't pay you for that, but I can offer a bribe. Ivy laughed through sudden tears. A bribe? To keep you, he growled softly. To keep you as my counsel, my conscience, and my wife. Marry me, Ivy. Be the queen of this city. Ivy looked at the ring, then at the man who had turned her life into a legend. Yes, she whispered. Dante slid the ring onto her finger and kissed her, sealing the deal. Ivy Sterling had missed her exam, but she had passed the only test that mattered, and it all started with a Rolls-Royce waiting at her door. Wow, can you believe how far Ivy came? From counting pennies for instant noodles to running the biggest law firm in Chicago and becoming the queen of the underworld. It just goes to show that sometimes the worst moments of our lives, like missing a huge exam or losing a job, are actually just the universe clearing the path for something much, much bigger. Ivy risked everything to save a stranger, and karma paid her back 1,000 times over. What would you have done? If you were late for the most important test of your life and saw someone hurt in an alley, would you have stopped? Or would you have kept running? Be honest. Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of twists, betrayal, and romance, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want more stories about unexpected romance and billionaire bosses, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.